Hello, this is Derek Hansen for SprintCoach.com, and on this episode of the Performance Concepts Chat, we're going to speak with Gary Reinl. A number of weeks ago, we did a Zoom Pop episode on the concept of using ice, cold, all of those types of modalities, for injury management, but also recovery. And so we put that together. We had a nice conversation. Pretty much everybody was on the same page about use of ice, and I think for the most part we all agreed that maybe it's being overused and there might be some specific applications. So we published that, and some mutual followers of myself and Gary, contacted him. We got into a conversation, and then I sent Gary the episode so that he could review it as well. And he wanted to do a follow-up and talk a bit about his research and experience and broad depth of research and practical experience in the field. So we got together and we did this little call, this video conference call, and he went into basically the research, his practical experience, and what he found about the use of ice for injuries. And honestly, it's pretty compelling. I can't say that I was a big fan of ice just based on my history as an athlete and a practitioner and a coach. I just felt it never really did, what it was billed to do. I had a lot of tendonitis and problems when I was an athlete in the knees, and constantly taking the ice cup, putting it on the knee, the tendon. Felt good for like 20 minutes, and then I was back to square one. I still had the problem, still hurt when I trained, and I never really addressed that through ice. Now I had some soft tissue work done later on. That seemed to help, and combined with some strengthening, that worked really well. But the ice didn't work for that particular application. So, and over the years, I found it just hasn't worked well for reducing edema and joints, especially following surgery. I just haven't seen the results. I've had better results personally using different brands of electrical stimulation, some of which I've had a hand in. So it was kind of interesting to hear about Gary's experience, which were similar. And of course, he's saying like absolutely no ice. And I don't know, even for myself, it's been so pervasive. Like somebody gets hurt, get an ice pack. That it's very hard a lot of the time to pull yourself away from that. And even the physical therapists I talk to say, well, I wouldn't throw the ice out. I think there's still a use for it. And I think you'll find from Gary's opinion, there really isn't. So, it really makes you think. And I think that's what I want from this discussion in terms of its benefit to you, is to really think about why you're doing what you're doing. Are you doing it because it's always been done? Somebody told you to do it? Are you getting results from doing it? And I think that's the bottom line with anything I do now. I'm trying to evaluate the efficacy, not just the reputation, but my practical efficacy of different techniques, modalities. And so, Gary talks a lot about, the meltdown and we're past the ice age. And I want you to take a look at what he has to say openly, and let me know what you think about the topic of ice. So really hope you enjoy this Performance Concepts Chat with Gary Reinl. Yeah. So give me a little bit of your background. Like, I looked at some of your stuff online, and I've seen you before on some different videos and stuff like that. But, if you could give me a bit of your background, that'd be very useful.
Well, the background is one that doesn't match the normal pace. I started out in 1973. I opened the 7th novelist gym in the world. And back in those days, it was an unknown idea that you're going to go to a gym and work out on machines that were for specific body parts. But it worked, and that's what started me. As sports medicine started to happen, I was the only person who knew how to use the new tools. Okay. So the doctors in town sent me all their post-op athletes. So even though I wasn't a physical therapist, and physical therapy wasn't really that big, there really wasn't sports physical therapy back then in the early 70s. So the next thing you know, I've got a very significant caseload of injured athletes and post-op athletes. And as time would happen, I continued to do some clinical research for the company, and had an odd shift because I went from a men-only athletic setting, training professional world-class athletes, to pregnant women. And you think,
Wow.
how do you make that shift? Well, because I guess I got bored with the everyday in and out of the pro athletes. And by the way, that was one-on-one training before one-on-one training was really popular. And in fact, today the trainers become somewhat famous. Back then, I trained my guys one-on-one and locked the door to anybody else in the room. Now it's almost a show.
Yeah.
I'm the trainer. No, I was the trainer. They were the athlete. They were the star, not me. But my interest shifted when my wife became pregnant, and she had a serious car accident a few years before. And I knew enough about that to say, if we don't do something, you're going to suffer. And if you remember an athlete, now you may not be old enough, but maybe you remember Franco Harris.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Franco Harris, I trained him for years. And I literally took Franco Harris's card out of my file. And that's the workout my wife did while she was pregnant. She did Franco Harris, now different weights.
Yeah.
Had no idea what I was doing, but figured it'd be better than nothing. Went on to do a clinical research project that wrote the first book on the topic of weight training during the pregnancy year back in the early 80s. Opened facilities all over the States here, about 18 facilities, I think is how many we ultimately opened. And then rules changed and culture changed, and people started going to gyms when they were pregnant and working out and doing yoga and all kinds of stuff. And next thing you know, there wasn't really a need for my specialty. But in the beginning, it was physician dominated, or I should say controlled. The physicians would refer people in. Nobody would ever come to a place like that without their doctor approving it. And in 81, getting approval was not so simple. I mean, it took a lot of effort to get the docs to agree. Then got picked up by one of those billion-dollar rehab companies because they wanted to take sports medicine into their outpatient PT clinics that were opening up. Now, remember, that's just happening too. In the early 80s, that there really wasn't outpatient physical therapy centers, especially sports medicine-focused physical therapy centers. And I knew how to use the equipment, and I knew how to talk to the doctors. So the next thing you know, I'm a program development director for a billion-dollar rehab company. And if I can say the rest is history, the rest really became history because that gave me my springboard. When people said, well, is he qualified? They said, well, look what he did over here.
Yeah.
And they no longer asked, did I have a PhD? They no longer said, are you a physical therapist? And time passed, and I picked up a new interest, and that was the elderly. And the elderly was a wonderful market for me because it was everything I ever dreamed of. Nobody arguing with me. No one, because they weren't doing anything. They were playing with marbles and strings and colored balloons. So I walked in with a sports medicine model, and I dominated the market. If you look that up, my website is called 2 Week to Walk. Excuse me, 2weektowalk.com. And I have everything documented that I did, how I did it, who said it, who was in charge, how I ran it. There are now over 2,000 facilities here in the States. There may be some in Canada, but mostly in the States that use my protocol. So that became the next step, was to go back to pro athletes. So when I finished that one, and these things run like 10 or 12, 15 years each, by the way. It's not like I'm jumping, job to job. I've been doing this stuff since 73, so I've had a lot of spots to do different things. And then I came back to professional athletes and said, I need to get something special here. Something needs to be different. And what I looked for was, well, what are they missing? What can't they do that they say they need to do? Well, that's get people stronger and try to help them recover. And I said, well, what's the obstacle? And the obstacle was swelling and pain and circulation. I said, well, I know how to fix that. I did that many years ago in my industrial rehab programs. And with that, we started using a muscle stimulation device. And as I got into pro athletics, I don't know whether you know, but I have over 100 pro teams that I work with. And over 500 collegiate teams altogether. But don't let that mislead you when I say 500 collegiate teams. One school might have 10 teams.
Yeah.
So over 500 really isn't that big of a number. It sounds big. Over 100 pro teams, that's pretty big. But over 500 collegiate teams, and they all have the same problem: pain and swelling. What do we do? How do we deal with this congestion? Because if we can get rid of the swelling and we can restore circulation, athletes will get better, A, because there's less congestion, and B, because now you can do work with them. And I found a tool that does that. And I was often asked, in fact, probably the most common question was, well, should I use ice before your product, while we're using your product, or when we're done with your product? And I gave an answer that it was good enough. Nobody was fighting my answer. But my answer was, well, don't use it while you're using the muscle activation device, because that's speeding things up, and ice will slow it down. So we don't want to slow it down. So don't use it while you're using me. And I prefer you not use it before, because then I have to overcome that coldness before my product will work. And if you need it, use it at the end. And that's the answer I gave for years. And then one day I realized that's just not going to work. You got to give them a more comprehensive response to a serious question like this. So I started reading, and I read and I read and I read hundreds and hundreds of articles. I would say thousands, but honestly, so many of the articles were just a rehash of a previous article that I won't even count it as two. And had to flip topics. I went from reading about ice, cold therapy, that pushes you over to the heat, because if you're going to read about cold, you're going to have to read about heat, because they're going to cross each other. And then I started to read about compression. And the next thing you know, I was looking at the RICE protocol. Had no intention whatsoever of ever even thinking of the RICE protocol being wrong, because everyone knew it was right. RICE is nice, right? It's got to be right. It can't be wrong. And who would dare to question the most recognized protocol in all of Western medicine? And when I say that, sometimes people say, well, what do you mean? I say, well, let's put it this way. Every school nurse, every EMT, every candy striper, every coach, every doctor, every therapist, every trainer, every chiropractor, everyone knows the RICE protocol. Well, you're going to challenge that? Well, yeah, I am actually. It's wrong. I say Rick is wrong. And RICE, ice, and compression are wrong. All three completely wrong. I can prove it, and I can prove it without even. I don't have to reference an article to prove it. I don't have to reference anything. I just ask you a simple question, and that became my process. Is that I had to then defend my challenge, and once I started winning the challenge, it became very popular. And now over 1 million people have heard my message. And I don't know if any of the people who were on your last podcast on this topic had heard of me or read my book or watched my stuff. I don't know that, but I suspect some of them, by some of their answers, I suspect some of them had heard. And if you noticed, and I watched very carefully and listened to every word. I don't pass by when there's a panel like that, because it's so rare to have a panel like that. You're in a half a dozen people ever to put a panel together on a question. I watched every word, and I watched the body language, and I watched what people said. And honestly, I couldn't find a single person defending it. There were people saying, oh, yeah, I do it. Or, oh, yeah, well, yeah, no, I mix it with it. And then they want to go to something else. They didn't want to stay on it. Even though your podcast was about icing, they didn't want to stay there. They kept shifting.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? Like I did find it funny how it did gravitate to other areas. And there was almost this, I don't know, like uncomfortableness around like they didn't want to say ice was bad, but they wanted to just move on to something else and just say, well, I don't want to really deal with that, because it's such I guess a powerful influence in rehab and sports, like put an ice pack on it, that nobody wanted to say that's absolute crap. Let's not even do that. Right. So, but I know what you're saying. It was an odd interaction, I would say.
Well, and I understand it, because I've done it 1,000 times or more. And when I start talking to people, I begin with, if I could prove to you that the godfather of the Ice Age, the Harvard-trained physician, board-certified 4 medical professions, if I could prove to you that he has not only publicly recanted, said, look, I made this up, Research has clearly shown I was wrong. Don't do it. It delays healing. And then gives a specific reference to the fact that it causes additional damage. If I could prove that he's publicly recanted, that he said, look, I made it up, I'm wrong, and that he wrote the foreword to the Anti-Iceman's book, would you at least listen to me? Here's the book. There's the doctor's name. Wrote the foreword to the book. I have two forewords, one by Kelly Starrett, rather famous here in the States. I imagine in Canada you've heard of them too, the CrossFit mobility WOD guy. A DPT, very, very smart, very respected, has a big place in the military and professional athletics. And in his world of CrossFit, he's a superstar. Now, when I say that, it doesn't mean much to people that don't know who he is. But clearly, you would have to say the guy who made up the protocol, the godbrother of the Ice Age. I mean, if he's saying it's wrong, that he made it up and it's not right, gosh, maybe I better at least listen to what this guy has to say. And with that, I can get most audiences to at least drop their guard. And let me talk to them. And you ask them, why do you ice? Why do you think it's right? Why do you think rest is right? Why do you think compression is right? What makes you believe that that's a good idea? Do you have any evidence? They claim evidence-based medicine nowadays. Okay, do you have any evidence? I mean, can you show me anywhere how sitting still improves the situation? No. And in fact, the exact opposite. We have learned. In fact, a quote that I love to quote, so I'm going to actually read it so I don't get it wrong. One of the most important concepts in orthopedics in this century, this was written in 1999. In this century is the understanding that loading, active recovery, accelerates healing of bones, fibrous tissue, skeletal muscle. Basic scientific and clinical investigations have shown that these tissues respond to certain patterns of loading by increasing matrix synthesis and in many instances by changing composition, organization, mechanical properties of their matrices. Now, look, why does that matter? Because sitting still is the opposite of that. Sitting still, you atrophy, you waste. Stillness is the enemy. It's a nightmare. I don't know anybody in medicine today, in the sports medicine world, who would say rest is right. But they still say rice, the rice protocol. No, it's wrong. Rest is wrong. And then you say, well, how about ice? Everybody does ice, right? I mean, that's the I, it must be right. Let's put ice on it. Well, why? Why would you put ice on it? Specifically. Now, I got your message that you weren't really a big ice follower, but
I'm just going off of like when I was an athlete. Here, get an ice cup, put it on your tendon, like my tendonitis, and it still hurt. Like maybe for that 20 minutes when I couldn't feel it because of the ice. And some people will use that as an excuse, like that it has an anesthetic purpose, like it's pain management, so that's good enough. But I was still sore the next day or sore 30 minutes later. So I just, from personal experience, it just never worked for me.
Well, I liken the idea of putting ice on for pain control to the sympathetic bartender that gives you an alcoholic so you can temporarily feel better. You get that sympathetic bartender gives you a drink and then you temporarily feel better. But did you solve the problem? No. Was it a good thing to do? No. But the guy did feel better, and he's an alcoholic, so we'll let him go. Well, it's like, well, no, that's wrong. Well, stop. Why'd you do that? Why did you put ice on? Well, to make it not hurt. Well, did you solve the problem? No. Did you make it worse? Yes. But we got relief. Well, no, that's clearly wrong. That's not how you do it. It's not what you're trying to do. You're doing the wrong thing. When you put ice on, you delay healing, you increase swelling, you cause additional damage, and you shut off the signals that alert you to harmful movement, and you need movement to solve the problem, and you need the signals to alert you to harmful movement. So I don't want to shut the signals of pain off. I don't want to do that. I want to know that what I'm doing movement-wise is good or bad. If what you're doing movement-wise you can't feel because you made it numb, well, that's pretty dumb. So it's simply wrong. And people will say to me, well, do you have any proof that icing delays healing? Well, of course there's proof. There's unchallengeable proof. The whole process is that it slows down the metabolic process. It shuts off the flow of nourishment to the area and waste from the area. What's your next question? You never heard of frostbite? Well, yeah, but that's different. No, it's not different. You're killing skin cells. Google cryotherapy and nerve damage. You'll see that you have lawsuits enough that you could spend the morning reading all the lawsuits. And you say, well, oh, but everyone knows don't ever put ice over a superficial nerve. Well, why? Well, because it'll kill the nerve. Okay, so that's not good then, is it? So we know it kills skin. We know it kills nerves. And of course, the landmark study by the guys in Colorado Springs, the NSCA, the National Strength Coach Association, their journal back in 2013, where they did a study where they thought they were going to prove that icing accelerated healing. But they actually had to change the words to the title of the article. It says, topical cooling, icing delays recovery. And you go, wait a minute, what delays? Well, read the article. It actually killed the muscle cells. How they know? Because they biopsied them. They know what happened. And you go, well, wait a minute, it kills muscle cells? Yes, it kills muscle cells, nerve cells, skin cells. Now, on top of that, if you just would stop and say, well, what about the effect post-treatment? Well, non-freezing injury is very real. In fact, that's the article that Dr. Merkin references when he publicly recanted. He said, look, there's out front, like 2 hours, an hour and a half after you ice, you're still killing cells. It's like, well, yeah, but that's theoretical. No, it's not theoretical. It's proven fact. It's in the index peer-reviewed studies. If, in fact, you care about evidence-based medicine, you couldn't possibly put ice on somebody in good conscience. You couldn't do it. Well, who would ever delay healing, increase swelling, cause additional damage, and shut off the signals that alert you to harmful movement when you need the movement to solve the problem, and you need the signals to prevent harmful movement? Who would do that? Well, wait, let's make it worse. Let's add compression, too. Let's see if we can really screw things up. Now, you take compression, and I didn't go after compression in my book because I didn't want to fight 3 battles at once. I didn't go after rest because I figured the rest deal was already over. I figured almost everybody knows that sitting still is the enemy. That's understood. Don't do that. The compression, I went, I'm going to let it go. So I didn't touch it in the book because I just went after ice. You know, it's called ICED, the Illusionary Treatment Option. But I should have called it RICE, the Illusionary Treatment Option. But then it would have been a battle too big to fight. I mean, you got to stay focused on what are you going to argue about. Oh, and by the way, just a small little thing in parentheses for anybody who's listening right now saying, what? Hold on. There have been 40 years of use, of widespread use. There's not a single article in the journal supporting using ice for damaged tissue. None. There isn't any. Oh, no, there's something. No, there have been 4 worldwide reviews. 2012, British Journal of Sports Medicine. 2008, the Journal of Emergency Medicine. 2004, the American Journal of Sports Medicine. 2004, the Journal of Athletic Medicine Research. 4 worldwide reviews. Summary conclusion to all of them, although popular, there's no evidence whatsoever this helps. And in fact, the exact opposite exists. There's undeniable proof it delays healing, increases swelling, causes additional damage, and shuts off those signals you need so they can solve the problem. It's completely wrong. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Doesn't everybody know this? If you would read, you would. If you read Guyton's textbook of physiology, you'd go, hey, this ain't how it works. If you read the discoveries that were made back in 2010, at the Cleveland Clinic in the research center there, they found out that, oh, surprise, guess what? Macrophages are actually coming to the site and setting up and delivering the proteins for insulin-like growth factor for the muscle regeneration. So if you don't let the macrophages get there, which is what ice, compression, and rest do, they block it. They don't let it get there, it can't release the insulin-like growth factor, so you're screwed. It's like, well, who would do that? So I had to find a question. And I made up a question. It took me years to get the right question because, see, if I come in and say, don't use ice or don't use compression or don't rest, I may get some buy-in a little bit from this person or that person, but, oh, yeah, I believe you about ice, but I think, you need to rest and you need to compress, or I agree you shouldn't rest, but I still use ice and compression. And they can't give you everything. I made up a question. It took me years. I'm going to ask you the question, and you will be the 4,000th person or so that I've asked the question to. Do you honestly believe that trapping the waste in and around the damaged site and preventing the natural flow of oxygen and supplies is a good idea? That's a yes or no answer. Do you honestly believe that trapping the waste in and around the damaged site and preventing the natural flow of oxygen supplies is a good idea? What's your answer?
I'm going to go with no, Gary.
Okay, think about how nuts this is, because that is precisely what the Rice Protocol does. Traps the waste in and around the damaged site and prevents the natural flow of oxygen supplies. Now you say, no. That's what it does. There is no debate. You don't get to question me on this, and I can prove it. When you rest, you slow the process down because there's no loading. Remember what the Academy said in that quote in the beginning here. One of the most important concepts of the century was the understanding that loading, stressing, or active recovery was how things heal. So you take that away. So now you're not healing because you didn't activate the muscles to induce the stress that brings in the nourishment and helps flush out the waste. So you missed that one. The ice, of course, slows everything down, increases swelling because it causes the backflow from lymphatic vessels into interstitial space. That's not even a question. By the way, there's one of the screwiest things you could ever think of if you're thinking about the topic. If you want to get really serious and think about something, say, wait a minute. Why would I want to block the fluid from getting to the site? Why would I want to do that? And that's a fair question, right, isn't it? Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to block the fluid from getting to the site? Don't the healthy vessels dilate and increase perfusion? Isn't that a quote right out of your clinical textbook? The damaged vessels constrict and the healthy surrounding vessels dilate and increase perfusion. Why? Why would your immune system do something so dumb in something so important? See, it's not wrong. It's supposed to do that because it's mobilizing the repair and cleanup crew. It's actually bringing the supplies to the site, the macrophage, the insulin like growth factors coming to the site, along with, by the way, anything that is needed in oxygen and blood. Because remember, at this point, the damage has compromised circulation to the area, so the body's trying to save itself. But you're so smart, you close it off and you stop the supplies from getting there. But in the process, you made a bigger mistake. You prevented the waste from evacuating. See, swelling isn't a good or a bad thing. And by the way, it's not inflammation. Inflammation is the immune system's response to the damaged site. The inflammatory response is phase 1 of 3 phases of healing. Again, check your clinical textbooks. If you don't believe me, if you think I'm some nutcase, you go and look. You'll see there's 3 steps to healing: inflammation, repair, and remodel. Not my opinion. If you went to the fancy schools, it's inflammation, proliferation, and maturation. Okay, but for all of us regular people who didn't spend the big bucks to go to school, it's inflammation, repair, and remodel. Same thing, by the way. Proliferation is the same thing as repair, and maturation is the same thing as reorganizing, the area. So it's inflammation, repair, and remodel. So you got to remodel. So now you say, well, so what's the worst thing that you can do? Sit still with a bag of ice wrapped tightly around the area, which will literally trap the waste in and around the damaged site and prevent the natural flow of oxygen supplies. So you take your hand, grab your wrist, and squeeze it. And squeeze it for me. Do it. Squeeze that wrist. Okay, now, let's say this is your foot, and you're wrapping it tight, and you're going to sit still with a bag of ice. And you're going to prevent the flow into your hand because you don't want it to swell. Because you mistakenly think that swelling's a bad thing. Swelling's not a good or a bad thing. I'll go back to that in a second. So here you are, and you're compressing this. And you're preventing the fluid from getting there. Are you going to prevent 13%, 87%, 91%, 12%, 8%? How much percent? How much are you going to restrict? Do you have any way of measuring that? Do you have any reason to believe what you're saying is right? Do you know anybody who's ever checked that statistic? Maybe there's not enough. Maybe you should increase the flow in. Maybe you shouldn't decrease it. But you've never even checked that, have you? Yet you'll do it. You'll compress it blindly in evidence-based medicine. I'm a practitioner. I'm an evidence-based practitioner. Okay, let me get this straight. You don't know if there's too much fluid coming. You didn't even qualify whether the fluid should be coming. Because if you knew why it was coming, you would realize that it's to mobilize, repair, and cleanup crew and package the waste for evacuation. But let's just get over that and say, oh, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about it. How much should you block it? Are you different than me? Are hands different than feet? How would you know when you blocked it enough? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to document it? How are you going to know what, hey, maybe I better get some more? You don't know any of these answers. You don't know any of these answers because it's dumb. It's just dumb. Now people go, oh, Gary, you shouldn't talk like that. Okay. I believe that would be inappropriate to do that. No, it's dumb. Okay, I'm not going to say it's inappropriate. It's dumb, and I can prove it to you.
Can I ask you a question just to?
Sure.
What happens when you speak to medical professionals about this? Like, is there an awakening? Do you get kickback? Like, are people going, wait a minute, I didn't learn this in school. Like, how does that interaction go?
I always get, I didn't learn that in school. In fact, I'll give you the most recent one that happened that was so amusing. I'm explaining everything, and I asked a simple question. Do you honestly believe that trapping the waste in and around the damaged site and preventing the natural flow of oxygen supply is a good idea? And they all went, well, no. It was a university. It was a major university. And there's 30 people there, 30 trainers, therapists, the head trainer. I believe the doc was there, but the doc didn't stay the whole time. The doc was there most of the time, though. And they're just sitting there. And they went, well, no. And I said, well, you do understand when you do the Rice protocol, that's precisely what you're doing. One of them unconsciously blurted out, oh my gosh, you're doing everything wrong. And I said, no, not everything. Just this one thing. The vast majority of clinically isn't, you just got misled and roped into something that you never questioned. See, I ask people all the time when I give my talk, when you were in school, were you tempted to raise your hand and say, Professor, I have a question? If we do the Rice protocol, won't that trap the waste in and around the damaged site and prevent the natural flow of oxygen supplies? I mean, did anybody in your class raise their hand and say that? The answer is so far no. Because you sit there, you're told this information, and you're stuck with it. I gave a lecture at a university in Nevada, and it was a graduate class, and the professor brought me in. My book was required reading for the class, and he brought me in at the end of the semester before their final test or final paper they had to hand in. And when he brought me in, they had people who what I was saying was true, but then there were the people who said, well, I can't believe this because my professor just taught me the opposite. So I can't believe this. So, well, we talked. I explained everything to him, and I got 3/4 of the room as my guest looking through the room. I had 3/4 of them going, uh-oh. I then instructed everyone, understand, when you go and take your test, give the wrong answer. If you give the right answer, you'll fail your test.
Yeah.
So you see the problem. They're being taught this right now. They're being taught false information right now, today. And in fact, more than 100 pro teams that I'm involved with, and the over 500 collegiate teams, I'll bet you that 80% of them still right.
Oh yeah,
No,
think of like, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I'm thinking of the companies that make the big freezers that make the ice, and then the ones that have these compression sleeves where the ice water goes through, like cryo cuff, whatever. And I'm just thinking of the impact that your truth would have on just their businesses, right? Because that so much is predicated on ice.
I've heard them very seriously. I mean, I've heard them. And I've heard them not because I'm mean, but because what they're saying isn't true. And I know most of the national reps of those companies, and they didn't know what they were telling people was wrong because the rice is nice. So here we do this. Here, let me see if I can figure out a way to make it worse. Sit still, or cold water, compressing significantly against your skin. What could we do worse than that? We'll beat it with a ball-peen hammer while you're sitting there. Okay, that I don't know how to make it any worse. It's completely wrong. You can't match it to any clinical recommendation. It's not there. There's no evidence to say you should do that. But forget evidence. We're not stupid. We can think. would you really want to prevent the natural flow of oxygen to the area? Would you really want to trap the waste in and around the damaged site? Would you really want to do that? It's not. Well, that's what you're doing. Why are you doing that? And
Now,
you're doing that. Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was going to ask you, is there any, in your opinion, purpose to use ice under any circumstances for injury, recovery? I mean, because you'll have these people with these cryo chambers now, right? And they're, oh, it helps with recovery. And then you have, you know, the Wim Hof followers who are jumping into pools of ice or tubs of ice saying that this is going to regenerate things or make them recover faster. What are your thoughts on those things, like cold, and is there any place for it?
First of all, I think that Wim Hof is brilliant. He's extraordinarily smart. He's unbelievably disciplined. Some of the things he does with mind control are just staggering. But I have not heard Wim Hof say that you should put ice on damaged tissue to facilitate healing. That's not something he says. Now, maybe tomorrow he'll say that. I haven't heard him say that, but I've listened to half a dozen of his lectures, and I know people who have gone to him, and he doesn't say to do that. He knows. I suspect he knows that's wrong. Now, he is the Iceman, and I am the anti-Iceman. So, you know, I'm the anti-Iceman, and he is the Iceman. But he's talking about mind control, about hormonal responses to cold. By the way, I know some monks who practice the same language that Wim Hof does by using heat. They go into hot saunas.
Yep.
So it's mind control. It's can you get a hold of yourself and control things? They say, "Oh, Wim walks in his underwear and his bare feet, you know, through the snow." Okay, that he didn't say it was for your bruised ankle. And if he did say it was for that, well, then I would ask him. I'd say, "Let me just ask you a question. Do you think it's a good idea to trap the waste in and around the damaged site and prevent the natural flow of oxygen supplies?" And I cannot imagine with his understanding of physiology and his general knowledge that he would say, yes, that's a good idea. So I don't have any question about what Wim does. I think he's very smart. In fact, I think he's really smart. And some of the stuff they're proving is really quite stunning, what you can do with mind control and cold. Now, with that said, that has nothing to do with managing damaged tissue. And let's just say it was true that you should ice damaged tissue. Let's pretend for a minute, yes, it's right. And I would say, so what temperature is the ideal temperature to get the skin to? Well, we don't really have that information. You've had 40 years to figure this out and you don't know the ideal temperature? Well, no, we never figured that out. Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Is there an ideal temperature? Or is there not one? Can you just do any temperature you want? Like, can you put 6 towels on and a bag of ice on top? I actually saw someone put ice on top of a cast. The hell are you doing? What are you doing putting ice on a cast? I can't even follow that. But I actually saw that. So if you said, well, what's the ideal temperature? Do you understand that that's like a pretty fair question? I mean, isn't that reasonable? Say, what temperature am I looking for? Well, let's just say that you had a superficial muscle that was strained, okay? What's the temperature that you want to get it to? But let's forget that. Let's say there is a proper temperature. It's X. Yep. How would you get a deep muscle, or worse, a bone bruise, that temperature without destroying the superficial muscles? How would you, if there was a right temperature, it's X, that you need to get the muscle to, how would you get that temperature to a deep muscle or a bone bruise? How, without destroying the superficial muscles? You would destroy them. There's no way you can't have surface temperature and send it all the way down to the bottom without destroying that which is on top. It's impossible. And that's why there is no protocol. After 40 years of wide surgeries, there's no protocol. You can't open a book and say, here's how you do this. There's no such thing. There never will, because it's silly. It's an illusionary treatment option. It doesn't work. It delays healing. It increases swelling. It causes additional damage, then shuts off those signals that alert your harmful movement, and you need to move with this problem. What's the next question, guys? Stop it. Now, when it comes to the cryo chambers where they blow cold air on you, I did it. I went and did it. And I kind of left them out in my book. There's only a couple things that are really referenced in the literature about why it isn't good. You know, one woman died in Nevada because she fell asleep or whatever. Who knows what happened. She shouldn't have been in there by herself after hours. I tweeted that the next day. People were sending all kinds of notes to me saying, "Hey, Gary, you see you kill somebody." I'm like, stop it. This has nothing to do with the cryo chamber. Okay, it had to do with somebody going in a place where they shouldn't have been by themselves, and it shouldn't have happened. And what they did was user error. The machine does not kill you. She died because she broke the rules. And by the way, you could take a ball peen hammer and whack yourself in the head 50 times, and that might kill you too. It doesn't mean the hammer's a bad thing. So you got to watch criticizing stuff. So with the cryo chambers, there's no real evidence that it's bad, but there's no real evidence that it's good regarding healing or recovery from musculoskeletal tissue damage. Now, they say, oh, it reduces inflammation. And then I go, guys, stop saying that because you make it so easy for me to take you down. Well, what do you mean? It does. Here's the problem. When you take inflammation away, you screw the healing process. It's phase 1 of 3 phases of healing. It's inflammation, repair, remodel. You can't, if you block inflammation, you block the response, and what you get is both vascular and muscular adaptation dampened. Now, that's not my opinion. Go to my Twitter feed. You can pull the articles up. It's right there. They know it's true. In fact, the journal Hemophilia, about 2012, I could be wrong on that date, but the journal Hemophilia, if anybody really wants to know, it's in my book. And if you want to know, just email me or you send me and I'll tell you. But it's the journal Hemophilia on using ice to prevent bleeding or to stop bleeding. And what they found out was, first of all, that would be the 5th worldwide review, but I didn't count that because it was really for an abstract reason. But even when they did a worldwide review, they went, this is really popular, but there's no evidence that it helps. What they found out was it screwed up platelet aggregation and adhesion, and it caused leaky clots. So that's about the last thing you'd really want to do with a hemophiliac. So that's no longer the recommended protocol for those who understand what they're doing. And you go, well, wait a minute. They put ice on people all the time to stop the internal bleeding. Okay. You shouldn't do that. That's wrong. For one thing, the internal bleeding is stopped in less than 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. It coagulates. It shuts it down. There's a mechanism inside your body that stops bleeding. And you say, well, what about if it doesn't work? Go to the hospital if it didn't work. Okay? Don't stand there saying, gee, he looks like he's bleeding severely internally. Go to someone that's how to fix that. You're not going to fix it with a bag of ice, for heaven's sakes. But we get people who don't understand. And what they'll do is they'll procrastinate. And for example, you roll your ankle. I have a paper, by the way, called Procrastination, a Fundamental Flaw in Injury Management. I highly recommend everybody reading it. Very easy to read. It's a 10-minute read. I have all the facts, all the references right in the paper. My co-author is the editor-in-chief of the Fishing and Sports Medicine Journal. Spectacular paper. Now, it's free, by the way. You just put in procrastination, my last name, it'll pop right up. Why do I say that? Let's just do a scenario that you and everyone in the sports world is familiar with. Athlete rolls their ankle. Mm-hmm. Team runs out, the medical team runs out, make sure that he's not choking, that he's not going to bleed out, there's not a bone sticking through the skin. We just make sure that everything's okay. Get him back to the bench. Someone makes a decision to put a bag of ice on while they're sitting there because the game will be over in 4 minutes. We'll go downstairs, we'll get an x-ray, we'll see what's going on. Okay, so they put the ice on. Would that be a good use of ice? No, that wouldn't be a good use, but I understand why they do it. They want to give some comfort. They want to make it look like they're doing something for the athlete while they're waiting for the game to end. I get it, but will it cause much damage? Probably not. It's kind of like blowing cold air on you for 3 minutes. It probably doesn't hurt anything. I doubt it has any benefit for recovery of damaged tissue. And by the way, there's no claim that I've seen that it does. There's claims that it reduces inflammation, which then I say don't say that because that's actually a bad thing. That benefit, that's a detriment. So don't do that one. Don't make that claim. Now, is it true? I don't know. Maybe it does. But if it does, it's bad. It'll dampen both vascular and muscular adaptation, so you don't want to do that. But so we get this young person rolls their ankle, and they get him downstairs and they ice him. They X-ray him, and the doc comes out, pretty confident, pretty happy, and says, "Look, good news. A 2nd or 3rd degree sprain, and you'll probably be good in a couple of weeks. And don't just tonight go home, rest, give it a chance to calm down, to heal, and just don't do anything, and use ice as needed. And if you need some pain meds here, I'll write you a pain med. And let me give you an anti-inflammatory, and I'll give you a muscle relaxant. Oh my God, why don't you make me go crazy? Why in the world would you want to shut off the pain? Because I need the pain to tell me if what I'm doing is hurting you. I get it, but I've worked with people who have broken collarbones, full mid-shaft fractures, and in 15 minutes we got them in a neutral position, and we're decongesting the area with a muscle activation device. So on a neutral position, you decongest the area, you won't have so much you won't have so much pain. But so now they do this, and they tell the player to go home, and they wrap them up and they put a bag of ice on. You've seen them leaving the locker room. They're on crutches and they got a big old swollen up ice bandage with a big thing of stuff all over their ankle of ice. And they go home, and when they get up in the morning, they're miserable, way worse than when they went to bed. And now they make it back to the training room. And I go, why'd you do that? And they're like, well, Gary, what do you mean? Well, you told them to rest, let it calm down, give it a chance to heal. That's 100% inconsistent with how we heal. You don't heal by sitting still. When I grew up in the 60s, late 50s and 60s, that's in the last century for you, all you millennials out there. That's last century was the 60s and 50s. But what happened was the coaches told us to walk it off. They said, don't sit still, it'll tighten up. Keep moving. We had no idea why that worked or how that worked, but we knew it did. And we knew the next day, if you got up and you started moving around, you start feeling better. Well, all that was doing was using the body's natural healing process to resolve the problem. What's the problem? Well, the tissue's damaged. Well, that's not really the problem at that point. Now let's go back to that ankle. You get up in the morning, it's all swollen, a lot of pressure, the toes hurt, the wiggle, blinking your eyes gives a sensation of pain to your foot. I mean, come on, what is going on here? Well, what's wrong is you have so much pressure from the congestion that it's beginning to make the nerves scream. And then because of all the pressure and congestion, you start to lose circulation to the area. Now you begin to suffocate and kill otherwise perfect healthy cells that weren't involved in the initial trauma. So now you're killing stuff that shouldn't be dying, and it hurts. And now that gets congestion. So now the congestion begets congestion, things are getting worse and worse. So you got this problem where you're saying, well, what could I have done differently? Well, let me ask you a question, trainers, therapists, doctors. When that guy rolled his ankle and you initially evaluated him, did you think it was going to swell, yes or no? Well, yeah, that's why we did what we did. Okay, but what you did completely screwed the system, okay? You compressed it, so you prevented the flow of nourishment and supplies in, and you blocked the waste out. Everything you did is contrary to how the body works. And you told him to sit still and not move it. And you said to him, let's give it a chance to heal. But you did everything that destroys tissue, not repairs tissue. And you say, well, yeah, we knew it was going to swell. Okay, here's a simple story. It works well with people in Canada, not so well in Miami. If you knew it was going to snow 24 inches next 24 hours, if you knew it, 1 inch per hour. If every hour in the hour you open your front door, with a good stiff broom, you could effortlessly keep that inch of snow off your sidewalk. It'd be simple. If, however, you wait till morning and open your door to 24 inches of angry snow, I assure you it will not be simple to clear, and you will not do it with a good stiff broom. Why did you procrastinate and send that athlete home without a solution to the problem? Well, what's the problem? He hurt his ankle. No, hurting his ankle is minor. That's minor. The problem is the congestion. The congestion is blocking the movement of nourishment and waste. So how do you get rid of the congestion? What do you do? Okay, let me make a wild guess. Here's what you do. Sit still, wrap it up tightly with a bag of ice. That'll get that congestion out of there. Now, can you find anybody you've ever met in your life who would tell you that would get the congestion out of there? I mean, honestly, I'll take anybody. You bring a 6-year-old forward that says, Yeah, if you've got a lot of congestion in an area, the best way to get it out would be to sit still, wrap it up real tight, and put a bag of ice. That'll get it out. Now, of course, that doesn't work. So what should you have done last night? Rather than let that 24 inches of angry snow accumulate, because you knew it was going to happen, why didn't you begin activating the muscles regionally? Because remember, I didn't actually say this, so not remember. The lymphatic system is how the waste evacuates. The particles are too big to go back to the venules. That's the end of, you've got arteries that go in and you have veins that go out. And on the end of the veins and arteries are things that connect to the capillaries. But this end connecting to the capillaries on the return are venules. Well, the particles are too big to go back that way. They've got to go back to the lymphatic system. Well, here's the problem. The lymphatic system is a passive system, nearly fully reliant upon muscle activation around the vessels to move the waste. In effect, you milk the cow backwards, okay? How could sitting still, making something cold and compress it, possibly move waste to a passive system? Well, there isn't even a maybe here. Of course it doesn't. Well, what about if you had activated the muscles regionally and milked that waste out all night long? In the morning, would as much be there as there is now? Well, of course not, because you've been milking out all night long. Would there be almost none? I've had times, well, I actually have a photograph from a pro hockey team that I hit with a puck. And the trainer wrote back to me and said, Gary, after our talk about why wait, my procrastination article, he said, I decided to send a player home last night who was hit with a puck, and he had a tennis-sized ball lump on his shin. And I told him to just activate his muscles all night long with your machine. And he showed me two pictures. One the night before, the other about 12 hours later. Gone. Because you see, we never allowed that 24 inches of angry snow to become a mess. We got it down and then just kept it off. So the whole rest of the night, once we got the swelling down, once we got that 24 inches gone, because it swelled really fast when he got hit. So you had a mess. But by the way, if you hadn't pumped it out, it'd have been way worse by morning. We had it completely clear by morning. Not only almost clear, completely clear. And in the procrastination article, you will see that we state that we've cut recovery time in half. That's not true. We have not cut it in half. Significantly faster than half. But my doc said, Gary, let's not push it. Half is good. I said, okay, I can live with half, but just so you know, we had the guy clear in that case in 12 hours. That's usually a 4 or 5 day problem. So that's way faster than half.
What do you say to the people who are like, I use ice and heat and we create a pumping action, we do the contrast. What do you say to those people who like, I'm going to plunge that ankle into a cold bucket and then a hot bucket and back and forth, or, you know, what is your response to those people?
Well, passive stimulation is passive stimulation. It's
Yep.
not how waste moves through your lymphatic system. You can daydream all you want about the question, but putting your foot in cold water, then in hot water, may dilate vessels and constrict vessels, but that's not how the lymphatic system works. It's a passive system, nearly fully reliant upon muscle activation around those vessels to move the waste. So it doesn't work. Now you say, oh, well, it must work a little bit. Okay, let's just say a little bit, but that's not how the lymphatic system works. So if you're going to say you're evidence-based, if you're going to say you're a clinician and you're going to really, go down to the facts, how could a passive heat stimulation move waste to a passive system, a lymphatic system? How's that possible? By the way, it's not, it's impossible. Now, the thing about heat, an interesting about heat is that you're tempted to think heat's a good idea because cold is wrong. And when I was reading and doing all of my research, which by the way, I took about 10 years, and I read every article, I read 13 clinical textbooks, including Wikipedia. So what I did was I read 12 clinical textbooks and then also Wikipedia. So I guess you couldn't call Wikipedia a clinical textbook, but it really is. Actually, Wikipedia is the most up-to-date document of all the textbooks I read. And I kept reading and I kept looking and I kept going, oh boy, we got a problem with heat because people are going to say, well, if ice is wrong, heat must be right. No, it's not. And here's why. When you put heat on, it causes vasodilation. So it increases the flow in with no exit plan. It's a passive stimulus. Your immune system is already dilated to healthy vessels, healthy surrounding vessels, and increased perfusion. So you already have the proper influence on the increased flow. And now you're adding to it with no exit plan. It's a nightmare. That's why walking it off works. Because walking it off increases circulation in and simultaneously out. If you don't have an exit plan, you can't possibly justify passive heat. Now, if you say, well, people like how it feels. Okay, just realize what you're doing. If you're going to put heat on, make sure you got them doing ankle pumps while you're doing it. Or make sure while they're in the heat and you're increasing the flow in, because everyone who says it, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating there, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the most, what's the best way to say this? Because I don't want to say they're the best, because you could be great and not be at a pro team. You know, and just because you're at the University of Alabama doesn't mean you're the best. But it just doesn't. But if you get to that level and you're holding that spot, you're probably pretty good. Now, there could be somebody great at a high school level, and they just don't want to go to the pros. Okay, I'm not saying that. But I have had the opportunity to interview many hundreds of the most elite athletic trainers, physical therapists, sports physical therapists, sports chiropractors, orthopedic surgeons involved with the teams. And I've interviewed them all, and I've asked them all the questions we're talking about now. When I'm done, no one, not a single person ever has said to me, you're wrong. None. No one's ever said you're wrong. Because, see, I'm not right or wrong. I'm simply stating clinical facts. So I'm not, I was asked in an interview a couple years ago, and the person said, well, what's your opinion on this? I said, I don't have an opinion. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, I'm not smart enough to have an opinion. You want an opinion? Find a brain surgeon who's done 300 surgeries on the brain and ask them about brain surgery. There you can get a qualified opinion. I don't have opinions. I state facts. Here are the facts.
Gary, I have about 5 minutes left. This is all awesome. How do people get more information on your book, your website, and all that? Where can they get in touch with you? And, you know, and then just some final thoughts on how do you turn this battleship? Because obviously there's a lot of momentum behind the ICE movement. You know, so yeah, give me some locations where people can find more about you, but also your final thoughts.
Well, you can go to ICE, which is the name of the book. So if you put in ICE and my last name, Reinl, R-E-I-N-L, you'll find it on Amazon and Kindle. My website is Gary Reinl at AOL.com. I'm not at AOL.com, GaryReinl.com.
Okay.
So you just go to my website and then all the stuff's there. And my book is the only thing I sell, by the way. I'm not selling anything else. All my papers are free. Just download them and use them. All the interviews that I've done, what I care about is this, a very simple issue. I don't want to see an athlete not win because they were mismanaged. I want you to lose because you weren't the best. That's why. Very simple. I got an easy rule. I went through my athletic career, which ended after high school. I wasn't great, but I competed on national level in high school. I was good, but I wasn't good enough to go to the next level. But I was never mismanaged. And when I lost at the nationals, I lost because the other people were better, not because I was mismanaged. Now, I see kids today, young people today, and they're mismanaged. Do a simple example. High school pitcher, everybody knows this kid is going to the pros his whole life, since he's like 9. That boy's going to pitch in the pros someday. Okay, that's probably a stretch, but we'll see. But here's what happens. He's now a senior in high school. The scouts are coming down to offer him a full ride to a major university. All he has to do is be respectful on the mound that day and throw the ball. Doesn't have to win. He can walk people. Just be respectful. Let the scouts see that you're a good person. He hurts his arm about 6 weeks before the big day. His trainers have him ice it. His dad tells him to ice it. His pastor tells him to ice it. He's icing in the morning before he goes to school. He's icing at lunch. After school, he's icing it. So now the kid isn't getting better, he's getting worse. He's on the mound, can't throw the ball, he's in total frustration. He knows the scouts are looking at him, he knows all he has to do is be good, and the kid blows it. And he blows it not because he couldn't make it. He blows it because he was mismanaged. That is unacceptable to me. So I'm going to change it. In fact, I was told, I don't know whether you know this little fact, but I have players from all 30 major league teams, Major League Baseball, and over 200 major league pitchers who are using my muscle activation technique called Mark Pro. Now, with that said, there's only 390. I have over 200. So that means I have more people doing this, the muscle activation, than all other techniques combined. How's that? Now, I had a trainer say to me back in the early years, about 8 years ago, when I first started going after major league pitchers. And I told him, well, I'm telling you, this is not, I wrote my book 5 years ago, so this is not new. I said to him, or he said to me, he said, Gary, he said, listen, I just want to give you some advice. You can't talk like this. You'll ruin your career. And I said, well, I appreciate that, but you know what? I don't really care. I'm old, and I don't really care about my career. I'm going to fix this wrong. And he said, well, be careful. And I said, I'm not going to be careful. I'm going to kick doors down, and if things break, they break. And if you don't like me, that's too bad, because I'm stating clinical facts, and you are working inside an illusionary treatment option. So here I come. You don't want to hear it. It's okay. I don't care. We have over 1 million people have heard it now. Now, what will happen next? I go to a trade show, like say Major League Baseball is next week.
Yep.
I'll go to Major League Baseball's winter meeting. I will have at least 10 head trainers thank me for leading them out of the Ice Age. Well, there's 30 teams, Gary. I'll take 10. How many you got? Okay, I'll take 10. That's a third of them. Then I have NHL, I have NBA, I have Major League Soccer. Who did I miss? Hockey?
Have you done something at the NFL Combine?
Oh yeah, I go every year.
Yeah.
I've gone every year for 18 years.
Nice.
This will be my 19th year this year. And I've got 2/3 of all the teams in all the leagues except for baseball. I have 100%. And you go, wow, that's crazy. Right, it's here. I work with, be careful how I say this, but I'm just going to say it clean. I work with the military. And the military has very important needs to do the right thing. When you're a pro athlete, if you throw or not, we'll get over it. When someone from the military that's needed is down because you mismanaged their sprained ankle, this is a real problem. This isn't a baseball problem. This is a real problem. Well, I have many people in the military who listen to me. In fact, I challenge people to come up with one better than this.
That's great. I mean, what I'll do is I'm going to obviously circulate this and do what I can to get your information out and get the facts out as well. So, yeah, I'll coordinate this with you, and I'll put it out there and have it on. I'll have some little social media bits to put out there and just, see if I can help in any way. But it's been very, very useful.
Well, I appreciate that, and
thanks for contacting me. Thank you.
That was one of your listeners.
Yeah.
Sent a note to me and said, Gary, did you see this? And I think they sent you a note saying, how can you have a panel discussion without the anti-ice? So,
I think we tried to contact you, but it just didn't get through in time. So, I mean, it was kind of a spontaneous thing, like, hey, let's talk about this, right? So
I'm actually glad I wasn't on the panel, to tell you the truth. And the reason is I got to hear how none of them wanted to answer the question.
Yep.
And to me, that was like, okay, we are winning. We're pushing on the door and it's starting to open. Now, what will happen next? What will happen next is that the Rice protocol will die. And it's dying. It's dying a slow death all over the place. So some people say, well, I don't believe in the Rice part, the rest part. And I don't believe in the compression part. And I don't believe in the ice part. And soon it's going to merge. And once it merges, and athletes start saying, I'm not doing that. We got them. When the athlete starts saying, I don't want to do that. The interview I did with Corey Kluber, who won the Cy Young last year, not this season, but the 17. Corey Kluber won the Cy Young Award. And in the interview I did with Corey, Corey says, I don't ice, it makes my arm feel stiff. I use the Mark Pro, the muscle activation device, and my arm feels the best felt my whole career. That one interview got me 50 different additional pictures.
Nice.
One guy saying, I don't ice, makes my arm feel stiff. I use the Mark Pro, my arm feels the best felt my whole career. So what can we do? All I ask is this. Every person who hears this, anyone listening, whatever reason you had to tune in, if you believe it and you get it, teach one more person. If we keep doing that, we got 1 million already in, we can win this. And we can win it not because we're going to win. I don't get a prize if we win. I don't get anything. But I'll know we took the protocol down. The protocol's wrong. It shouldn't be there. And no kid, no young athlete should ever lose because they're mismanaged. Lose because the other person's better. That's all I want. I don't care. Everything else, in the World Series, I have teams. I have both teams. Obviously, I have all 30 teams. People say to me, who do you want to win? I say, I don't. I'm like, well, how could you not win? You want somebody to win? No, I don't want anybody to win. I don't really care who wins. I only care that everyone gets to play their best and the best person win. That's all I care about. You mismanage the player, and now they've got a problem where they didn't heal because of your mismanagement, and they lose. We won't know if they could have won. That is unacceptable. You should lose because the other person is better, not because you're mismanaged.
Great. Thank you very much, Gary. Thanks for your time. And I'll follow up with you now that I have your email as well, and I'll send you through some stuff as well.
Thank you. I got you out of my spam folder, by the way.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
So,
okay.
So I end the same way every time.
Okay.
The meltdown continues.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Anytime. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.